Good morning, everyone. My name is James Morton, and I'm the Deputy Director here at Virginia 21, and we are currently live with another one of our Virginia 21 Google Hangouts for Higher Ed. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Representative Scott Rigell. He's a congressman from Virginia's 2nd Congressional District, and we are also joined by 4 of our Virginia 21 student members who represent both universities in the Congressman's district, as well as some other universities, and who happen to be residents of the Congressman's district. So just to get things kicked off quickly, I'm going to let the Congressman introduce himself a little bit, maybe talk about some of the things that he's been working on up in Washington, and then from there we'll go and bounce it to the 4 students that we have on the Hangout currently and let them ask the Congressman a question. So with that being said, Congressman Rigell, thank you so much for being on. How are you today, sir?
Thank you, James. I'm doing well. Really appreciate the opportunity to, if you will, hang out with everybody. I've been looking forward to it. We love technology, as I mentioned earlier, and this opportunity to connect with our young people is really a special privilege today. My name is Scott Rigell. I am in my first elected office, and what a journey this has been. I'm a businessman who's transitioned into public service. I'm in my 2nd term in the House of Representatives, and I sought this office because I'm really concerned about our country. I am the father of 4 wonderful children, my wife Terry and I, and I'm just concerned about our future. We can have a bright future if we make good decisions and find the common ground that I'm certain exists. So seeking to set us on a good financial footing to make sure that our young people have good opportunities after they graduate from college, and to restore really your confidence, our young people's confidence in our future and in our government. I believe the government can work, it must work. There's always going to be spirited debate, but we can do better than we are now. We have an obligation to you and to your generation, and indeed to my grandchildren and the generation that they represent. So I thank you all for being on today. There's so much to talk about, but I'd rather start out by hearing your questions. So thanks again.
Wonderful. Well, we're certainly pleased to have you on, Congressman. Just to kick things off, I'm going to go ahead and let our first student ask their question, and let me introduce Richard Tran, who is a student at Norfolk State University. Richard, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, sir. Morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Richard. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, you're big on finding common ground between both political parties. So with so much gridlock in congressional politics, what are you going to do to work across the aisle on issues that impact young Virginians?
Well, in full disclosure, I think everybody ought to know Richard's a friend of mine, and it doesn't disqualify him from asking the question. But he's a great leader at his school at Norfolk State University, and he's been part of what we're trying to do here, actually, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you about this. Communication is essential. That is just meeting with people, and I, on a regular basis, make a very deliberate effort to get to know my Democratic friends, and indeed they are my friends. When we fail to communicate with one another, whether it's in a home or a nonprofit or a business or government, that's not a good situation. So a proactive dialogue, including, for example, accepting an invitation from the president to meet with him and to talk with him. You know, as a Republican, I knew that was the right thing to do. Got criticized for it just a bit, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And I'll finish this up, Richard, by saying, and you've heard me speak about this many times, is that civility is not weakness. And I think we tend, when we disagree with someone, if we're not careful, we can just start to kind of caricature a person. Republicans do that to Democrats. Democrats do that to Republicans, kind of caricature people. And I don't think this is good for our country. So I've been very deliberate about elevating the level of civility. I can go into more about that if you'd like, but these are the things that I'm seeking to do, and I think it's making a difference. And I'll close with this: getting the facts of the matter rather than the talking points. What are really the facts of the matter? And I think that's been helpful to us as well.
Wonderful. Well, I definitely appreciate that answer, sir. Going next to our second question, I want to introduce you to Shiana Gomez, who is a student at Old Dominion University.
Morning, Shiana.
Good morning. With the renewal of the Higher Education Act upon us, What steps do you feel need to be taken to ensure academic quality moving forward, and who are the actors making this possible?
It's a good question. You know, we really do, as a community, as a country, and at all levels, at the state level, at the local level, have an obligation to provide our children and our young people, our young adults like yourself, with an outstanding education. There's a lot of pressure on tuition, for example. We need to make it affordable. That's one reason I voted, the principal reason that I voted last year, not once but twice, for House Resolution 1911, which ensured that, you know, interest rates didn't double on student loans and things like that. I want to mention something here that you may think I'm kind of going off topic, but I'm not. Healthcare is the cost associated with that, like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. These are essential programs, and they've got to be preserved and protected. But we are not doing a good job. Republicans and Democrats up here are coming together and making these decisions that will kind of help us to, in a responsible way, get control of those costs. And the fact that we haven't been able to get control of those costs, it's putting pressure on every area of the budget, all the other areas, transportation, bridges and roads, and our first responders, for example, and schools at all levels. So part of what I'm trying to do up here is to get some good decisions made on those areas, and that would free up some funds to reinvest in education.
Thank you, sir. Next, I would like to introduce you to a woman named Ryan Carey. Ryan lives in Virginia Beach, but she is a student at Longwood University.
Morning, Ryan.
Morning. Okay. So although there are 4 million Americans dealing with student debt, including 41 members of Congress, and currently in the Senate there are 2 plans aimed at tackling this issue. Senator Warren would allow some students to refinance their loans and make up this loss of revenue through a tax increase on millionaire Americans, while Senator Rubio's plan would allow businesses to invest in students, but students have to pay back a certain percentage of their future income. How do you feel about these plans, and what can the federal government do to ease the pain of student debt?
Well, I think we need to understand what the principal drivers of higher education are. At the school level, at the college level, it's faculty and facilities. Those are the 2 principal drivers. So the trustees at every institution, at Longwood, at Old Dominion, at Norfolk State, and every other university and college across the country, the Board of Visitors, as they're perhaps called, Board of Directors, they have a duty to make sure they're doing everything they can to hold costs down. Now, there's another thing that's driving up tuition costs, and specifically in Virginia, and that is the continued decrease in the amount of state funding that's going to state institutions like Old Dominion and UVA and Virginia Tech. And the reason that there's a lot less money going into education is principally, not at all, but principally because of Medicaid and the expenses associated with that. So that's another reason why I'm focused on getting solutions to some of these healthcare issues, because it really is affecting every area of our community, including specifically education. I think that students need to be very careful and wise about how much debt that they take on. I personally, I stayed at home. I went to a junior college and I worked part-time because I was really concerned about taking on too much debt, and I did use student loans as well to get through school. That's an important concern, and I think too that the institution itself, Longwood, ODU, all of them have an obligation to right up front disclose, here's how much student debt that the average person's coming out with from your particular career path, here's what the income levels are, and make sure there's a full understanding, as much as can be made, so the student knows how much debt to take on. Okay, now, once that debt is taken on, and to the point of your question here, we need to help get our economy going, make sure that the economy is strong. I'm really big on this, especially in our area with Coastal Virginia Energy, getting the jobs there so when you get out, you're not working outside of your field on a part-time job. You're working in your field with a good paying job. That's a real commitment of mine. And with respect to the interest rates, again, I voted for 1911. I'm not familiar with Senator Warner's bill, and indeed I'm not familiar with Senator Rubio's bill. And that's not unusual. There's a lot of things taking place here in Congress, but I'll look at, consider, and support any legislation that makes financial sense if it will help ease the burden on our students and also makes sense from a financial standpoint.
Okay. Well, thank you for that answer, Congressman.
I know it's pretty involved, but I really wanted to communicate with the students this morning the importance of a comprehensive approach to this that includes job creation, because that generates the tax revenues that we need, important ideas on that, and also on reforming these healthcare costs in a responsible way, in a bipartisan way. We have an obligation to do that for our students, my children as well. Our youngest daughter, Shannon, just graduated from Belmont in Nashville, and I know it's a costly endeavor to get a four-year education.
You are definitely correct about that, sir. Just to make one quick clarification for those watching the Hangout, the other plan besides Senator Rubio's plans was actually Senator Elizabeth Warren's plan, not Mark Warner's plan.
Listen, I'm very open to looking at that, and oftentimes the way our government works up here, of course, is that sometimes a senator will have you might say a reciprocal bill, a mirror bill in the House. A House member might have a bill that a senator then picks up. So I'm very open to looking at these and advancing that along with other good legislation.
Well, that's actually, your answer to this question is actually a really good segue into Gabby's question. So Gabby.
Gabby.
Yes.
Gabby is she's a student from Old Dominion University. So Gabby, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, I think now would be the perfect time.
Okay.
Okay, good morning, Congressman.
Gabby, good morning.
Okay, so you know there are thousands of students, as you just mentioned, who are still in debt and everything in Virginia. So my question is, with student debt increasing as a barrier to economic advancement for young Virginians, what steps can you take as a congressman to ensure a better understanding of the potential return on investment of college education?
You know, Gabby, it's easy for someone like me in elected office to think, okay, let me give perhaps you or any other student or anybody else in the district, you know, kind of the answer that I might think you may want to hear. But I have a duty, I really do, to share with you, of course, my candid and forthright thought on this matter. There is a role for the federal government in education. I don't see it as strongly as some do. I believe that most of this should be driven at what I'd refer to, and this comes from my business background. I think decisions that are made closest to where the challenges are found, those are the best decisions. And so what I mean by that is that there is some federal role here, but indeed the good board at Old Dominion and the president, who is a friend of mine, they have a duty, I think, and there was an institution, I don't recall what the name of it is, I just read the article this morning, somewhat getting briefed on this, but there was an institution, it might have been the University of Vermont, where they put their counseling center, instead of tucking it away some back room, they put it right in front in the middle of the student activity center. And this makes sense to me. You know, I always put it this way: when Americans are given good information, they make good decisions, and that includes young people, young adults like yourself and others. But you do need good information. It's called, in the former business that I was in, it's called a full disclosure. Do you know what you're buying? I think the seller has an obligation, if you will. You know, they're selling, in a way, in a sense, educational services. And that institution, whether it's ODU or Longwood or Tidewater Community College or any other institution, has an obligation to be really upfront with charts and graphs, things that are easy to understand, say, okay, now if you're going down this path, here's what you might expect. And I've sat down with my own children, and when they told me their career paths, 3 of them went college, 1 of them went, you know, a different ways, not going to college, and that's an important career path too, and it's a legitimate one, more of a trades route. But for those who are going to college, and even on the trade side, here's what you're going to pay for your education, and here's what the average salary is. I told my daughter, and I'll be very candid here with you, our oldest daughter, Lindsay, she got a degree in English. And I said, Lindsay, we're gonna help you learn how to budget on what a school teacher makes that's an English teacher. And I kind of helped her with that, understand that. Now my daughter Shannon, she got a degree in biochemistry and molecular biology. I don't know where that background came from, but she's got, I think, she would probably, when she gets her job, she'll probably make a bit more than my daughter Lindsay would have with an English degree. Now there's exceptions to that, but those are the kind of things that I think an institution has an obligation to help our young people to understand. And ultimately, as an adult, it is that student's responsibility to understand it, and that's part of the transition into full adulthood.
So just to clarify a little bit, Congressman, you're saying that you think that these conversations are things that should be happening more in like the career center level?
Well, if I understood, and I really want to answer Gabby's question, if I understood it correctly, it was, I think the context of it, and please, Gabby, if I didn't understand your question, come back on, but I think you were saying, how can we, what can be done, and indeed, what could I do at this level to ensure that students really understand, how much debt they're taking on and the consequences of it. I think that's what the question was. And look, we can pass some legislation that says, look, if you're going to loan people money, in fact, I think that's either law now, or I would say it should be law. When you're taking money, not things that don't need to be repaid back so much, it's really the things, student loans, things you're expected to pay back. That lending institution, if it's a federal government in partnership with the educational institution, they do have a duty to say, okay, here's what you can expect, and be sober-minded about it. Debt is a serious thing. I've used debt. I've used debt to get an education. I've also used debt to grow a business. But if you get on what I call the wrong side of debt, if that leverage is working against you, that's a tough situation. And I tell you, I'm very sobered by debt. As a businessman, before I go to sign anything that says I owe, I really give it careful thought.
Okay. Well, thank you for that answer, sir. And the return on investment discussion is definitely one that we've been witnessing happen a lot too. Senator Mark Warner sort of was getting at that too within the last month or two, and sort of talking about how colleges and the government can do a better job of sort of talking about what the return on investment is per major, per degree that you choose, depending upon the college that you go to. So from our standpoint, these are conversations that we're definitely happy to be seeing more and more at the federal level for sure.
Oh, very good. And I tell you, Senator Warner is a friend of mine. We work very well together. I call that, and we all do, we refer to it as the Virginia way. Mm-hmm. I think of it as civility. I think of it as trying to do what's right for the Commonwealth of Virginia, for the next generation. We don't agree on everything, but look, I don't agree with everything with my wife of 32 years. That's normal. But in principle, what you described that Senator Warner is advocating, I agree with. That kind of, it's just logical that with certain degrees, and there's always exceptions, you can point to exceptions, but you can say with certain degrees, here's the average income for that, not only 1 year out, but 3 and 5 years out. And so make sure that your debt is proportionate to your expected earnings ability.
Wonderful. Congressman, do you have time for just one more question?
I do. I've enjoyed this.
All right.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have to go, but the vote schedule's a bit early today.
No, we definitely just want to make sure that we are deferential to your time, sir. So the last question actually comes from a student of ours who was hoping to be on the Hangout this morning, but had some technical difficulty, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask it for her. Okay. And basically, just to summarize in Broadstead, this question sort of gets at the recent news that's been gotten by Representative Paul Ryan, who has been working on a budget for the 2015 fiscal year, and through sort of how things would get shuffled around in that budget, there's been some news about what the state of federal Pell Grants would look like in terms of the amount of funding that they would be getting, and I just wanted to offer that up as a topic for you to kind of weigh in terms of that investment from the budget and what you think should be done from a national level on the issue of Pell Grants and how we're funding that moving forward.
You know, I think it was Nelson Mandela that said that education is the most powerful weapon in the world. Of course, he meant that in the most positive sense. It's a weapon, something that could change the world for the better. Helping our young people and having a deep resolve to help our young people get a great education, that truly is a shared value. That is common ground. And I serve on the Budget Committee with Chairman Ryan, so I'm familiar with the question of Pell Grants. Pell Grants have an essential role. They're a good program. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that the students that need it the most are able to get that, and that it's used and it's preserved and strengthened and it's there for them. I'll also say too, and this is just part of life, is that it is also known, I mean the statistics are there, the facts are coming out of the different agencies, that there's some abuse in that too. I've had college presidents brief me on this, that there's outright abuse. So we need to be really smart about this and be able to separate the people who are, you know, abusing a Pell Grant, which makes it difficult for everyone. And so be able to be smart enough, really, as Americans, and we can do this, is to separate that type of abuse of the program so that we can preserve it for those students who need it the most. And I think that objective is shared by my Democratic colleagues. I think that's common ground. But we live in extraordinary times from a fiscal standpoint. We have a 1/3 increase in the number of seniors over the next 10 years. And I wonder sometimes, to be very open and candid with you, what some of the young people, or even perhaps you, James, think when I start talking about seniors and health care. You know, is Congressman Rigell kind of going off on a rabbit trail? And I would just respectfully submit that I'm not. You know, for those who are concerned about better roads, as I am, we really need to talk about how do we responsibly reform Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. For those who are concerned about providing a great education for our young people, as I am, then we need to be able to talk about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And I don't hear many people connecting those dots, maybe because it's an inconvenient talking point, maybe because it's cumbersome to explain in, you know, a minute or two, but I feel good about it, at least having shared that with our young people this morning. I have an obligation as a representative, as do all of us up here in the House and the Senate and the President, to get some better decisions over the curb here, because you're going to inherit, and the generation to follow you will inherit the decisions that we make, and we have an obligation to you. We really do. Just like every generation has the obligation to the next, you know, to pass on these amazing gifts of liberty and freedom. And those aren't trite words. You know, they were paid for at a heavy price. So anyway, I'll lighten up a little bit here just to say that I've enjoyed hanging out with you, and I really have. This has been a really terrific. Good to see all of you this morning. It really is, and this is neat technology. And James, I don't want to be presumptuous, but perhaps you'll have me back at some point.
No, well, thank you, Congressman. We've definitely appreciated the opportunity to have the conversation with you for sure, and we would love to have you back on again. Definitely, this has been a really wonderful conversation, and just to kind of, you know, talk to a little bit about what you were saying from my perspective as the deputy director and working with young people really all over the state. I know one thing that I can say is that we do our best to really talk to young people about not just the issues that specifically impact them, but how it all sort of works together, whether or not it's, you know, a Medicaid expansion or Social Security and any of that, but also kind of hitting the other side of that point too. I know in talking to young people, a lot of times they feel that the dialogue is sort of dominated a lot of times by sort of, you know, the issues that more directly impact older Americans and older Virginians. And so I really pride myself, and we really pride ourselves on an organization to be able to give students the opportunity to sort of be the AARP of their generation, to really talk about the issues that are impacting them.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it, and that needs to be done as well, James, and I don't want to diminish that. I mean, we need to talk directly about student loans. We need to talk about, look, it's 1.1 trillion. That is a sobering number. That's student debt, second highest, you know, consumer debt number that's out there. And look, it has my full attention. It really does. And I've appreciated this opportunity to catch up with everyone. Have a great day. Stay informed. Listen, if you haven't already, I encourage you to go to rigell.house.gov. The last name is RIGELL.house, HOUSC.gov. We have a newsletter that I send out about every 2 weeks or so whenever I think we have something relevant to say. And we try to make it really, it's not partisan in nature. I just try to give good information to the district and to all who are concerned about our future and know that we can do better. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Really appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you.